Thank you for joining this session on data governance and auditing for Power BI. My name's Alex Whistles. I'm a Microsoft Data Platform MVP and I'm Principal Consultant at Purple Frog, a Microsoft Data Analytics consultancy. So what are we covering today? Well, we're looking at how to better manage our Power BI estate. Both from a structural perspective, how do we arrange our workspaces and apps within our Power BI estates to better manage it? And then looking at auditing, who's consuming what and when, tracking adoption and security concerns, data governance, what's being consumed and where in terms of our data, what our data path through our estate, and then disaster recovery, how to prevent problems from becoming disasters. This session is sponsored by Power BI Sentinel. All of the things we'll be looking at today are inherent issues and concerns with Power BI. There's a lot of ways and tools inside the Power BI environment that you can help manage these challenges, and some third-party tools as well. And we'll be talking about some of those and including Power BI Sentinel where it's relevant. So the first thing we'll look at is structuring Power BI to align with your business. How do you determine what workspaces to have and where? The workspace structure, the permissions of those, etc. Now, one of the key challenges we see time and time again is workspace explosion. Of hundreds and hundreds of workspaces, people being allowed to create their own workspaces for every small scenario around the business. And this creates a lot of challenges from a management perspective. So the first thing we recommend is to turn off that ability, stop users from being able to create workspaces and pre-plan and control that right from the start. So we do that by looking at three different types of workspace, three different types of Power BI user. We have the central IT, the BI competency team, those that are really experts in Power BI, those that understand your data, know how to transform it, clean it, manipulate it, to create the gold standard of your reports. Then you have departmental users, departmental developers who understand how to use Power BI but may not be as experienced in data and may not have the same understanding of data for other departments as they could do. And then you have personal self-service users who just want to create their own reports. So if we look at sales, for example, sales department, we'd look at having three different workspaces. A centralized, curated, gold standard sales workspace for all of the centralized certified reports. We may then have a departmental sales workspace, and then a sandbox sales workspace for ad hoc self-service reports to go into that really shouldn't be trusted by other users in the business. So once we have these, we can start looking at, well, who should have access to these? And if we look at four different types of user, we'd have an admin who has admin rights over everything. We then may have the central BI developers who would have create or authoring permissions on all three of these. A departmental author, a departmental power user, will be able to consume central data, but only author the department or the self-service. And then self-service users can only consume content. They can only author and publish to their sandbox. Now, once you have this structure in place to find what these workspaces are, it becomes very easy to plan the security and the groups around it, which leads on to permissions and security management. So all permissions are allocated on a workspace level. We strongly recommend using Active Directory groups rather than individual permissions. And otherwise, if you start allocating permissions individually, it becomes a management nightmare, managing joiners and leavers, etc. So try and use groups for those and have one group per combination of workspace and role for that workspace. So for example, are they a consumer, are they an author, or are they an admin of that workspace? Apps are also a fantastic way of improving manageability. So each workspace has one corresponding app, and you can decide which reports in that workspace are included in the app. Now that helps when people are deploying new content into the workspace. By default, they don't get included in the app. So there's an extra step required to expose those reports to the consumers, which helps prevent accidental exposure of data that's been deployed to the wrong workspace, for example. And also apps just look better to users. They're a nicer interface to use. And then the default configuration of Power BI is not ideal from a security perspective. There's a lot of different options and settings you can choose within Power BI to help restrict potential issues. A few of them are listed here. So blocking workspace creation. Once you've defined which workspaces you want in the organization, you don't really want all of your users just creating their own ad hoc. Again, that just adds to the management problems. So restrict that to centralized admins. And block classic workspace creation. These old style classic workspaces aren't anywhere near as manageable as the new style workspaces. So some of these classic workspaces may be left in your organization. Try and get rid of them, upgrade them to new workspaces for better management. A few options such as, do you want guest users to be allowed? Do you want to be able to invite external users externally to your organization? Publish to web is a critical security issue. Of you can take a report, get a publish to web URL, and it makes that report available to people, bypassing security and monitoring. Do you want them to be able to export their data once you've got a report? Do you want to export a particular visual to Excel or to CSV? In a lot of cases, yes, but in some cases, no. You need to go and change these configuration options or make sure someone's managing these options. And a critical one is sensitivity labels, which we'll look at a little bit later on, where built into Microsoft 365, you can assign data sets or spreadsheets or any assets with a label that gives it restrictions based on the sensitivity. Is it confidential or is it not? And you can use that to automatically block things like emailing outside your organization or printing data, etc. And the final one is enabling certification. We talked about the 3 different levels of Power BI user. You can use certification to help manage these. So your centralized reports, centralized data sets can be certified as golden sources of data, whereas your more departmental data sets can be promoted but not as good as certified. Different levels of certification to help give users a better idea about expectations for their data. And a key part of security is not just stopping things from happening, but also monitoring and auditing who's done what and when. And there's 2 parts of this. And one is monitoring consumption. Who has actually accessed the reports in your organization? And you can do this within Power BI. And any report you've got, you can choose a view usage metrics report. And this will give you an idea about who has consumed that report and when. You can even see which pages have been consumed if the report has different pages, and get some information about report performance, how long it takes to render, etc. Now, this is a very, very useful report. It's available for free inside of powerbi.com already, but there are a few limitations with this. It's only got 1 month of data. And also you can only view 1 report at a time. So if you've got a few hundred or a few thousand reports in your organization, it becomes almost impossible to use this to really see security auditing over the whole organization. And so albeit it's a very good report and you should be using this to monitor adoption of an individual report, we need something a bit more powerful to get the holistic view. And this is where Power BI Sentinel can help. We can bring in Sentinel, and Sentinel captures all of your audit logs, all of your usage, and exports it into your own Azure SQL database. So you can then write queries on it, reports on it, and here's a Power BI report based on that usage data. So we can see trend information here over a whole year or more in your environment. And we can see based on a particular workspace or a particular user, what a user's been doing, even a particular report, the level of access, level of consumption over time. And this also includes personal workspaces. So we can look at a personal workspace here and see every single report with how many report views there have been and how that's changed over time. Now, Sentinel doesn't just track usage consumption, it also tracks audit information as who's changed what, who's done something in your environment. If we look at the audit log, we can see here all of these different activities and operations that exist in your environment. So here we've got who's created data sets, we've got that user, this workspace, this data set on that date and time. We can look at who's creating reports, who's deleting reports, who's editing data sets. and things like this, who's updating apps, etc. Every operation you can do inside inside Power BI can be tracked through this. So now let's look at data governance. Part of data governance is auditing, understanding who's done what to what, which we've already looked at. But then sensitivity labels are a key part of providing some level of restriction and control on what happens to the data in your organization. And then we'll look at data lineage, of building a picture and a pathway through of where data comes from and where it goes in your organization. So if you haven't already seen sensitivity labels, they're a built-in feature within Microsoft 365. Because of that, they're fully integrated into the whole Office suite of Excel, Word, etc., and of course Power BI. And when you enable them in your organization, in tools like Excel, you get this drop-down sensitivity label where you can choose which label applies to the data or the file you're working with. Now you control this list, how many options there are, and what restrictions are applied to each item in this list. And then you can see on the bottom, this has been flagged as highly confidential, and that label goes with that spreadsheet after it's been emailed around, uploaded to SharePoint, downloaded, etc. Now the same thing applies in Power BI. Within PowerBI.com, you can choose a dataset, choose settings, and then you can choose that same list of sensitivity labels to be able to apply to that dataset. You can also choose it within Power BI Desktop using the sensitivity menu item. Now, once you've done this, you publish the report to PowerBI.com, and even when you download data, when you export data from a visual, that label stays with that data. It stays in the Excel file that you get. And those labels can prevent emailing or printing, etc. It gives you that ability to restrict, but also just put a banner up for those users to notify them that it is sensitive, which raises awareness they shouldn't be exposing it to external users. And the final point of this is data lineage, where you need an ability to really see where your data is coming from and where it's going to. And this is vital for security and compliance, but also for impact analysis. Before making a change to any of your data systems, you need to know what's likely to be impacted and who may be impacted. So there's three options here. The first one is the built-in PowerBI.com data lineage view, which we'll take a look at now. When you look at a particular workspace, you can choose this view option on the top and change it to lineage view. And this shows you these data sources, databases, files, SharePoint, etc., are being consumed and accessed by these data sets and then by these reports. And this is a really useful view. But there's two main limitations with this. One is that it only looks at a single workspace at a time. So to build up a holistic picture of your entire organization, you have to run this for every workspace and then piece the results together yourself. But also that it only goes down to the database level. So this database here, for example, we can't see which tables or views are consumed inside that database, just the database itself. But it's still a very, very useful view to get a picture on where data is coming from. A more powerful option is Azure Purview. This is a relatively new tool that is available in Azure that builds up a lineage picture across your whole estate, and not just Power BI. Power BI, Synapse, SQL databases, data lakes, everything in your data estate. It can even hook into on-prem data sources as well. Very, very powerful tool, well worth looking into. Again, with this, there are challenges of it only goes down to the database level, doesn't go any further than that. And there's limited information about Power BI. It doesn't include things like the DAX calculations or any detail about those. But it does give you a very good picture across the whole organization. The third option is Power BI Sentinel. And Sentinel, we saw with the usage analytics earlier, the way that it pulls all that information out of Power BI and puts it inside a database for you that you can then query using Power BI. And so I've got a report here that I've built off that. And so here we're choosing a particular workspace. We can see which data sources are being used and then which data sets are, which reports they're being consumed in. And I can have a look through my different workspaces and see that. Or I can see the entire estate in one go. So I can see here all of my different servers, the gateways, databases, tables and views, and data sets that are in use. So I can choose, let's say, SQL Server. I'm going to choose this particular server. I'm going to choose this database. And I can see that these are the tables that are being consumed from Power BI from these tables. So I can choose DIM Customer, for example, and I can see that DIM Customer is being consumed by these data sets in those workspaces. So you can get a very powerful view of where your data is being exposed within Power BI using this tool. And it's not just the data lineage. We've also got things like permissions in here. So we can see in this workspace, these users have that permission to those reports, or even down to apps. This particular app, those users have those permissions, and these are the reports that are included. This then extends further into things like documentation. So we can see, again, we can choose a particular data set, we can see the tables, and we can see the DAX calculations. We can see the column definitions, including calculated columns with the DAX, data sources, partition information, Power Query code, etc. Now, all of this is exported into a rich data model within your database that you can then consume to write your own reports and your own information that you want to extract about your lineage, permissions, etc. So next we'll take a look at disaster recovery. What happens when things go wrong? You want to know, first of all, who did what and when. I've already looked at that with the auditing piece. But also, how do you recover? What's your recovery time objective and your recovery point objective? Unfortunately, Power BI has no rollback. There's no backup, there's no undelete, there's no version controlling. It's entirely up to you to manage this. Now, one approach is to manage this using the release process, deployment pipeline. Built into Power BI now, if you have Power BI Premium or Premium per user. And you basically have 3 workspaces. And you deploy through these workspaces with dedicated testing teams and deployment teams who manage that process. And this helps prevent issues from ending up in production, hopefully because they're caught by the testing team first. And this is a really good idea for your core team. We looked at the 3-level Power BI users. For the left-hand side, for your core central competency center, it's a great way of marshalling the release process of business critical reports through to production. It doesn't provide any rollback functionality if things go wrong, but hopefully it prevents things from getting into production when they in the first place. Another option here is to use OneDrive as a form of version control. So before a developer deploys their report, they save it into OneDrive, and that then gives you an ability to always go and get that old file beforehand. But it's not ideal. It's really only designed for your core central developers. It doesn't really work that well for your departmental developers, and certainly not for your self-service report consumers. They don't want the hassle of going through all of this. They just want to write a report and publish and use it. So this is where Power BI Sentinel steps in again. It automatically backs up your Power BI report on a daily or weekly basis, and allows you to go back in time and download any version you want. So if we look at the Sentinel portal, all we have to do is look at the backup functionality, and we can choose our workspace. Within a particular workspace, we can choose a report, and it'll give us a list of all the backups that have been taken for that particular report. And we can then download any version we want, and this will just download to your local PC, to your PBIX, and you can open it in Power BI Desktop. And from there, you can deploy it, you can roll it back, you can open it and have a look at it, etc. So Power BI Sentinel pretty much touches all of these different elements of governance and control within your environment. There's a lot you can do within Power BI itself. There are other tools like Purview that can help with it, but it's the only real tool that touches all of these different components and a lot more we haven't covered today. So hopefully you can take some of this back to your organization and enhance your Power BI configuration and management. If you'd like to know more about how Sentinel can help you do that, then please get in touch at powerbisentinel.com. We'll be delighted to talk to you. Thank you.